Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Wanderlust from Pectus Studios. Wanderlust is a 2 to 5 player game of traveling the world as you wander around the map, trying to go location to location, trying to figure out how to optimize your score as you go ahead and you gather souvenirs, take photos, and all of that in this game. This is a prototype, all rules, components, everything you see here subject to change, and I'll have a link down below to the Kickstarter so you can go ahead and check that out. But with that, how does this game play? How does it end? What are the things you do? All of that stuff. This is Wanderlust. In the game, you're basically going to be wandering around location to location. On every single turn, you can take 2 actions from a variety of actions possible. You can go ahead and gather cards from these cards over here, drawing from the supply or from the top of the deck. There's going to be wilds, which you can use but have a disadvantage, or alternatively specific routes you can go ahead and gather. You can also travel to a location, although let's go ahead and explain that now. Traveling to a location involves discarding a certain number of cards so you can move around the board, although you are trying to go to one of the target destinations. So for example, right now we have the players are going to be in these locations over here. I'm currently set up playing as the blue player over here, and you're trying to travel to one of these 3 locations, which are marked by specific little markers over here. Again, prototype, rules, components, all that stuff, subject to change. So, if I want to travel to a location, I need to get to that location. Things might seem far away, but airports are going to connect across the board. So you can go ahead and fly from airport to airport, assuming you have a flight card, and I drew into a hand of all flight cards. So you can fly to an airport if you want, but you also have to get to the airport. That's where I'm going to go ahead and gather a few of these cards just to make this a little easier, just to show you how this possibly works. But when I have those, my goal is to get to one of these. Right now we can see that this location over here is only 1 step away from Brasilia. So let's see if we can get over there. If I can go ahead and chain this to get there, if I can go ahead and drive, now I can't drive with this. I could use this and this and this. I could use this, then this over here, this flight. In fact, I could do it with my, ironically enough, I could do it with my original hand without even having to dip into the extra cards I put from display. Let's go ahead and show you how this works. I'm going to go ahead and move from this location to Warsaw using that route. I'm going to fly across this location. That's a little bit tricky because these locations over here are wild. You can use any card to go on those locations. When you use the air cards, though, you won't draw an extra encounter. I'll explain what that means in a second. So I'm going to go ahead and fly there with an airplane. I'm going to actually fly across from Frankfurt down to Brasilia. Now, when you actually fly, not when you use it on these routes, you'll go ahead and draw an encounter card. So I'm going to draw one of these cards over here. These are, by the way, missing a lot of art in these. Again, prototype. And you'll get the reward and whatever's there. You can hold on to these. You can gather the rewards. So you have these extra encounters when you fly from airport to airport. And then lastly, I'll go ahead and take another road from Brasilia down to Asuncion over here, which will help me take this card. I'm going to go ahead and draw another card to see what goes out over there. And then we have Bangkok. We're going to move this down to Bangkok, and there's a new location, which is actually very close to Singapore, possibly allowing somebody to go ahead and get 2 of those on their turn. I'm going to put this down next to me over here. I'll start collecting locations. Let's actually move my scoring card out of the way, put this location over here. And then from there, we're going to go ahead, and because I spent 4 cards, I'm going to move up my travel experience over here. Because I am the blue player, I'm going to move this up 4 points. Now, I mentioned earlier, wilds have a disadvantage. They are flexible. You can use wilds for anything, but the downside of wilds is that when you use them, you don't get travel experience from them. So any wilds that contributed to getting there, if I spent 4 cards and 2 of them are wilds, I will only move up 2 on this track. And this track is one of several things that will contribute to your score. That's effectively the travel action. You have to combine a variety of cards, find the pathway you need, and try to figure out how to move from wherever you are to one of the 3 target locations on the board. Past that, you can go ahead and do any of the actions over here, which these are going to be ways you can gather these things for points over here. They're going to be specific things, photos and attractions and souvenirs, where you're going to be trying to photos, postcards, and souvenirs, postcards, and photos, which you're getting at specific locations depending on the location type. You can see over here on Asuncion over here, this is a souvenir city. Some places you can get photos, some places you can get postcards, and some you can get souvenirs. For an action, you can go ahead and take a souvenir, putting it onto that card, and each location that holds souvenirs can hold up to 3 souvenirs. Those are going to be worth 1, 2, or 3 points respectively, and you can get any of those. You can either take actions, and sometimes you have extra discard costs to either take a souvenir, a photo, or to take a postcard from any of those locations, getting 1, 2, or 3 points, and then putting them on the location, and they are useful for a variety of things, including the end game goals. Those are the 5 core actions you can take on your turn. Drawing cards, moving to a location, and then any of the 3 actions to get those extra points on your turn. Past that, what are you trying to do? Why are you trying to do this? How you trigger endgame, all of that. Well, first of all, as far as triggering endgame will be triggered when 2 of these goals, when any player has their markers on 2 of these goals. Whenever you achieve one of these goals, and they are variable based on player count, so for example, Urban Adventure wants you to go to 6 of that type of city. Not all cities are that type, so you can see over here, again, using one of these cities over here, you can see that this is a different type of city, but you want to to go to 6 of these types of cities in order to accomplish urban adventure. Once you've done so, once a player has 6 of those in front of them, and you have to actually go to them, you can't just travel through these places, you have to acquire that city card, then you'll put your marker onto Urban Adventurer. Once a player has markers on 2 of the 3 goals, then not only are they going to be getting the points on those goals, but they're also going to trigger endgame. Every other player, including themselves, will have 1 more turn, and that will trigger the end of Wanderlust. As far as what you're doing, how you score points, all the things you're trying to take into account, well, first of all, you're going to get points for this travel experience track, like I mentioned already. The further you go up this track, the more points you'll get. You're going to get points for your goals as well. You're also going to get points for your collectibles. You're going to get points for the different types of collectibles, and then a full set of 3 different types is worth bonus 3 points. So we have the travel experience, we have the collectibles, we have objectives. Players are going to have their own, well, objectives are going to be these ones over here. Then we have destinations, where players are going to get points for the number of each type of city they scored, different cities having different rarities, but the more of a certain type you've gone to, if you effectively specialize in that city, you're going to get a chunk of points for going there. You also have continents visited. There's going to be the different continents on the board, and the more of them you visit, the more points you'll get, up to a possible 18 bonus points. And then lastly, players will have secret missions that they can go ahead and cash in their secret missions as well for a few extra bonus points, and that will be your total score in Wanderlust. There is, it's worth noting, there is a more easily accessible scoring mode if you want something a little simpler to play with kids or whatnot, but that's the core idea of the game. You are primarily collecting cards to wander around the board, then you're going to be taking actions to get postcards, souvenirs, and photos. You're trying to optimize how you do all of that to score as many points as possible in this roughly 45 to an hour-long minute experience. Which brings us to a review, starting off with ease of play. Rulebook's a handful of pages, really easy to dive into. There's a bunch of core actions. The core game is fairly easy to understand. A few things, I guess, with scoring maybe. It's a fairly easy game to dive into, to teach, to learn, and plays generally in under an hour. Perhaps if you're playing it at 5 players, it might drag. I've played it at 2, 3, and 4, so I can't speak to the 5-player game, but maybe it drags a little bit there, but I would say most of my games have been an hour or under in that general range. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, first of all, the variable goals. Offhand, these variable goals, the fact that there's a pile of goals you have, and the fact that you're choosing, well, not choosing, you randomly have a bunch of goals set up, means there's always a slightly different reason to do different things. That combined with your objectives means no matter how many times you play this game, you're always going into it with the general concept there, but what you choose to focus on, what you choose to specialize in, is always going to be a drop different as you go through the game. That combined with the variable scoring, with the 15 different ways you score, it's not 15, I think it's only 6 ways, the 6 different ways you score in the game, means there's a lot to consider as you go through this. There's a lot to consider as far as what you do. Running to location to location is not always the simplest way to points. Sometimes it's about getting, a bunch of souvenirs or things, or getting sets of different stuff. If you focus primarily on 3 different types of locations and try to get sets of them as much as possible, well, you may have the opportunity to optimize your score that way, or through visiting multiple continents, or through visiting the same type of city. There's a bunch of things to go through, and it's not as simple as moving from one location to another. It's about trying to find that way that everything ties together in order to get as many points as possible. I also like that aspect, and I didn't actually talk about this in the rules teach, but whenever you finish your turn with an empty hand, you get 2 bonus draws. Effectively, the game is rewarding you and incentivizing you to have efficient plays and to not simply hoard a handful of cards then move into the end game by just playing as many cards as possible. You are rewarded for taking multiple efficient trips throughout the game. So if you're used to Ticket to Ride and hoarding a handful of 25 different train cards before you finally start playing them, you could do that here, but it will not be the most efficient way to play the game. You often want to specifically try to be taking multiple trips as fast as possible and spending all your cards along the way. There are some rules in places to prevent you double backing or things like that, but effectively you're trying to be efficient and play that out, which I like. It keeps the game moving and it feels like it's not about hoarding until you rush to the ends. There's a lot of things to think about as you try to figure out how to score points in Wanderlust. As far as things I don't like, the biggest thing in terms of the genre of game that it is going to be this definite luck in play. There's definitely a degree of luck as players go ahead and draw a new city that pops up right next to where you are, and then you can go, even right here, if there's a player right over here, they can go ahead and take a 2-turn action to get both of these goals in one shot just because of the luck of the draw. That's going to be present in these cards as well, as you draw the cards that do or don't work, especially when you take into account those perfectly efficient turns. Drawing the right cards or having the right cards on display, definitely a factor. You also have the encounter cards you'll draw as well. There's just a lot of things that happen in the game as far as drawing things that either play into or don't play into your strategy, which hopefully evens out across the course of the game, but it is the kind of thing where it's definitely obvious, where you'll see a bunch of turns where people have things popping up where it's convenient for them. I also didn't love that there weren't a ton of ways to clear cards from the display. There are several times across the multiple games that we played that we had the display kind of clog up with a type of card that nobody really needed for their adventure, for their journey, what they're trying to do. Especially as players are trying to play efficiently for that extra 2-draw bonus. And because of that lack of display refilling, the display occasionally got clogged to the point that sometimes we just house ruled. We're going to figure out a way to clear it out because it's not fun to have a clogged up display that doesn't really clear out as the game progresses. Past that, as far as I can see others not liking, first of all, the map has no real sense of progress or blocking or any of that. This is more relevant if you're used to games where you have a map like this and you are placing things down on the board. It doesn't have that. You're moving from location to location, cards are popping up, there's no sense of impact on the world around you, things are just kind of popping up and then you're just getting there. Other players don't really block you, nothing gets in your way, so if you're looking for any of that, this doesn't have that in this game. And additionally, players will snatch the things you're planning on. And that also could add to the downtime, although I will say the games generally have been in the under an hour range, but you could have times, or will have times, not could, where you are planning around the perfect route to get from here down to here, and you play your cards, and you're thinking, you're not playing your cards, you're thinking on your turn, I'm going to play this, and then move here, and you have your cards ready, and then right before your turn, John goes ahead and snatches off the board, and it pops up over here, and now you need to rethink your turn. Not only is it personally frustrating, it can add to the downtime a bit. The only reason it doesn't bother me is because even though that definitely does happen and has happened multiple times when we play the game, it hasn't made the game overly extended. The game always comes in at a reasonable playtime, and to that end, it is a slight annoyance as opposed to anything serious for me. Past that, as far as final thoughts on Wanderlust, overall, I really enjoy what Wanderlust is doing. This is another game in the travel the world genre. There's a bunch of these. There's a bunch of games where you have a map, you have locations, you're drawing cards, you're figuring out how to move to location to location. They all have different rules, different structures, different things in mind as far as how they operate, and I like the way Wanderlust approaches it. This map over here, which to a large extent feels like craziness as you go through it, as you start to play the game, you start to see the patterns, and as you start to play the game, you realize that getting from wherever you are over here to over here is often faster or closer than you think. You start to see the patterns of the cities popping up from one location to the next. It doesn't feel like it's halfway around the world. It feels like it's up to you to find those patterns. And then combine that aspect of finding the patterns with the fact that there's multiple scoring aspects going on and multiple things taken into account. There's a lot to consider as you go through this, and it's very entertaining and well done as far as being another game in this genre that works really well. It's the kind of game I definitely do want to see additional maps for it, because otherwise this map could, to a certain extent, especially as you see the patterns more, it could get a little dry. I'd love to see different maps or even other rules or things added to further enhance the experience, but overall Wanderlust is really solid within the genre that this is. This is a 3.5 out of 5 for me. I really enjoyed my plays of it. It is a game that's on the lighter side, that's where the score comes into play, which means it's a little bit less my go-to type of game, but for what it's doing over here, I really enjoyed what Wanderlust is. Speaking of for what it's doing, as far as other game recommendations, the two offhand that are going to be most similar, that also I got similar degrees of enjoyment and, well, like a lot, are going to be Ticket to Ride. Ticket to Ride continues to hold up from Days of Wonder with a million maps, a million expansions, and a million ways to play. Ticket to Ride does have more of that on-the-map growth as you start to place your trains out, less to consider as far as the variable scoring, but a lot of fun things going on there. And then Trekking the World as well is going to give you another exploring the world as you gather souvenirs, objectives, visit locations. Both of them have degrees of commonality and differences from Wanderlust. All three are worth paying attention to. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. Hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.